Judge Gabrielle Watson stared at the blood pooling around her designer heels, the courtroom frozen in horrified silence. 3 bodies lay motionless across the polished floor. The smoking gun still warm in her trembling hand. She realized this moment would define more than just her career. As this shocking story unfolds before your eyes, tell me where you're watching from in the comments below. Hit that like button and subscribe if you want to discover how this respected judge went from upholding the law to holding a weapon in the halls of justice. What events could push a woman who devoted her life to the legal system into taking such drastic action? The answer might surprise you. The morning had begun like any other for Judge Gabrielle Watson. At 38 years old, she had achieved what many considered impossible for a black woman from her background. Rising before dawn, she reviewed case notes while her husband Marcus, a successful corporate attorney, prepared breakfast for their 16-year-old daughter Zoe. Their modernist home in the affluent Lakeview district represented everything she had worked for since leaving behind her small-town roots. Today marked Day 7 of the high-profile corruption trial of Officer Kevin Pearson, a decorated white police officer with 22 years on the force. The charges against him included evidence tampering and excessive force against black suspects in 3 separate incidents. The prosecution had built a compelling case, but Pearson maintained his innocence, supported vocally by the police union and quietly by many of his colleagues who filled the courtroom each day. As the first black female federal judge in the district, Gabrielle knew every decision she made faced extraordinary scrutiny. She had overcome the whispers about her diversity appointment through meticulous preparation and unwavering adherence to legal precedent. She had earned her position through graduating top of her class at Harvard Law, followed by a sterling career as both prosecutor and defense attorney before her appointment to the bench 3 years ago. The morning's proceedings began routinely enough. Gabrielle noticed the usual subtle hostilities from certain court officers, deliberately slow responses to her requests, the overfamiliarity with defense counsel, the barely concealed looks of disdain. She had developed thick skin for such behavior years ago. The prosecution called their technical expert who had analyzed Officer Pearson's body cam footage from the incidents in question. The expert methodically presented damning evidence. Pearson's camera showed clear footage of him planting a small bag of white powder in a suspect's car while his partner distracted the driver. Even more disturbing, the audio captured Pearson later bragging to fellow officers about how he put another one of them away. The defense attorney Lawrence Bennett immediately objected, claiming the footage had been doctored. Your Honor, we have serious concerns about the chain of custody for this evidence and request time to have our own experts examine the original footage. Bennett spoke with practiced confidence, clearly expecting his request to be granted as it had been in similar cases before other judges. Gabrielle reviewed the prosecution's documentation. Mr. Bennett, the prosecution has provided complete authentication records for this evidence. Your motion to exclude is denied. The jury will be permitted to view the footage in its entirety. From the corner of her eye, she noticed Officer Pearson shift in his seat, his face flushing with anger. During a tense mid-morning recess, Gabrielle retreated to her chambers to review additional motions. Her clerk Samantha handed her a plain envelope that had been delivered with the morning mail. This came for you, Judge. No return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a typed message. We know about 1224 Riverside Road. Zoe leaves calculus class at 2:15 every Monday and Thursday. Back off now. Gabrielle's blood ran cold. Riverside Road was her childhood address in a town she never discussed, and the details about Zoe's schedule were precisely accurate. She immediately called court security, who promised to look into it but seemed dismissive. Probably just someone trying to rattle you, Judge. Happens all the time in high-profile cases. When proceedings resumed, the prosecution presented additional body cam evidence showing Officer Pearson using excessive force against a handcuffed suspect, repeatedly slamming the young black man's head against a patrol car while using racial slurs. Several jurors visibly recoiled at the footage. Gabrielle maintained her professional composure, but inside she felt a growing unease as she noticed Pearson's expression darkening with each new piece of evidence. His right leg bounced rapidly under the defense table, and he repeatedly leaned over to whisper urgently to his attorney. When Bennett attempted another motion to exclude evidence based on procedural grounds, Gabrielle again denied it, citing clear precedent. Pearson's face contorted with rage. She had seen that expression before. On defendants moments before, situations escalated dangerously. She caught the eye of the bailiff, giving a subtle nod toward Pearson. The bailiff seemed to notice nothing unusual and merely smiled politely in return. As the prosecution prepared to call their next witness, Gabrielle couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to break. The threat against her family, the mounting evidence against Pearson, the unusual tension in the courtroom, it all converged into a knot of dread in her stomach. She had faced prejudice throughout her career, had received threats before, but this felt different, more immediate, more dangerous. And as the next witness took the stand, a young black man Pearson had allegedly assaulted, she saw something change in the defendant's eyes, a decision being made, a line being crossed. The prosecution's witness described how Officer Pearson had detained him without cause, subjected him to a humiliating search in public, and then planted evidence. His testimony corroborated perfectly with the body cam footage already entered into evidence. Throughout the testimony, Gabrielle noticed Pearson becoming increasingly agitated. His attorney repeatedly placed a restraining hand on his arm, whispering urgently into his ear. The defense's cross-examination attempted to paint the witness as anti-police with a criminal record, but the young man remained composed, his account unwavering. When Bennett requested yet another sidebar to argue about limiting testimony, Gabrielle denied it firmly. The witness will be permitted to complete his testimony, Mr. Bennett. The jury is entitled to hear the full account. That's when something in Officer Pearson snapped. With surprising speed for his stocky build, he leaped over the defense table, sending legal pads and water pitchers crashing to the floor. "You black bitch," he screamed, spittle flying from his mouth as he lunged toward the bench. "This is all rigged." The courtroom erupted into chaos. Jurors scrambled from the box. Spectators pushed toward the exits. The prosecutor dove under his table. Most shocking of all, the court officers seemed frozen, uncertain whether to restrain one of their own. Only the bailiff moved toward Pearson, but too slowly. Gabrielle reached for the panic button under her bench, but before she could press it, Pearson pulled something from beneath his jacket, a small handgun that had somehow made it through security. Later, Gabrielle would wonder if someone had helped him bypass the metal detectors. Time seemed to slow as the gun came level with her face. She saw every detail with crystal clarity, the sweat beading on Pearson's flushed forehead, the slight tremor in his hand, the cold black eye of the barrel just inches from her temple. "You think you can judge me? Some affirmative action appointment thinks she can destroy my life." Pearson snarled, pressing the weapon against her skin. 22 years on the force, keeping your people in line, and this is what I get." Gabrielle didn't close her eyes, didn't flinch. Somehow in that moment of terror, she found a well of steel within herself. "Officer Pearson, you are holding a federal judge at gunpoint. Put down your weapon now." Her voice remained steady, authoritative, despite the circumstances. Pearson's laugh was ugly. "Or what? You'll sentence me, I'm already finished, and we both know it. But I'm taking you with me, Your Honor." The gunshot was deafening in the enclosed space of the courtroom. Then another, and another. But it wasn't Pearson firing. Two plainclothes individuals, a man and a woman who had been sitting quietly in the back row throughout the trial, had drawn weapons with remarkable coordination. 3 bullets struck Pearson in rapid succession. Chest, shoulder, neck. He staggered backward, the gun discharging wildly as he fell. Searing pain exploded in Gabrielle's shoulder as one of the bullets, Pearson's or her rescuer's she couldn't tell, tore through her judicial robe and into flesh. Blood bloomed across the black fabric as she collapsed back into her chair, the courtroom spinning around her. Through the ringing in her ears, she heard someone yell, "FBI! Everyone down! Medical assistance needed!" The plainclothes officers rushed forward, kicking Pearson's weapon away and checking his vitals while keeping their own guns ready. One spoke rapidly into a concealed microphone, calling for backup and medical support. Gabrielle pressed her hand to her wounded shoulder, feeling the warm wetness spreading between her fingers. She fought to remain conscious as court personnel finally overcame their shock and moved to assist. Paramedics arrived with remarkable speed, suggesting they had been staged nearby. As they worked to stabilize both her and Pearson, Gabrielle could see the officer was still alive, though barely. Blood bubbled from his lips as he struggled to breathe. As they lifted her onto a stretcher, her path took her past Pearson. His eyes found hers, and with what seemed like his last reserves of strength, he pulled a paramedic down to whisper something. The paramedic looked confused, but Pearson insisted, gesturing weakly toward Gabrielle. Reluctantly, the paramedic leaned close to her stretcher. "He wants to tell you something." Gabrielle didn't want to hear anything from the man who had just tried to kill her, but some instinct made her nod. The paramedic helped turn her head toward Pearson. With blood seeping from the corner of his mouth, eyes already growing dim, he whispered 4 words that sent ice through her veins despite her pain. "They know about Riverside." Then his eyes rolled back, and the paramedics redoubled their efforts to save him, shouting medical terminology as they rushed him toward the exit. As they wheeled Gabrielle out through the stunned crowd, she caught fragments of conversation already spinning different narratives. Some called Pearson a hero standing up to a corrupt system. Others demanded to know how he'd gotten a weapon into the courtroom. News crews had somehow already gathered outside, cameras flashing as she was loaded into an ambulance. The female FBI agent who had shot Pearson climbed in beside her. "Agent Leslie Winters," she said crisply. "I'll be accompanying you to the hospital, Your Honor. We need to ensure your safety." As the ambulance doors closed, cutting off the chaotic scene, Gabrielle found herself wondering why FBI agents had been in her courtroom at all, and how Pearson knew about Riverside, a past she had buried so deeply that no one in this city should have known about it. Despite the pain medication the paramedics administered, these questions burned brighter than the fire in her shoulder. Something much bigger than a corrupt officer's trial was unfolding, and somehow she was at the center of it. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead as Gabrielle drifted in and out of consciousness, the steady beep of hospital monitors, creating a hypnotic rhythm. The bullet had torn through muscle but missed major arteries and bone, what the doctors called a lucky wound, though Gabrielle found nothing lucky about the situation. Her room at Memorial Hospital had been converted into a makeshift, secure area, with an armed officer stationed outside, and windows covered with privacy film. Despite the painkillers flowing through her IV, Pearson's final words echoed relentlessly in her mind. They know about Riverside. Nobody in this city should have known about her childhood, in that small town 400 miles away. She had legally changed her name after law school severed all connections to that painful past. So how did Pearson know? And who were they? Gabrielle noticed the hospital staff treated her differently than other patients. Some nurses were excessively sympathetic, tiptoeing around her as if she might shatter. Others displayed subtle suspicion, their smiles not reaching their eyes, their touch clinical and detached. The morning news played on a wall-mounted television, the muted screen showing footage of the courthouse with her photo in the corner. She could only imagine the competing narratives being spun about what had happened. A knock at the door preceded the entrance of a tall black man in his early 40s, wearing an impeccably tailored suit. "Judge Watson, I'm Special Agent Dominic Clark, FBI." He showed his credentials before taking a seat beside her bed. "How are you feeling?" "Like I've been shot," Gabrielle replied dryly. "What I want to know is why FBI agents were in my courtroom yesterday. Was there a credible threat you knew about but didn't share?" Clark's expression revealed nothing. "We've been monitoring Officer Pearson's case due to possible connections to a wider investigation. I wasn't personally present, but Agents Winters and Rodriguez were there as observers. Good thing, too." "Very convenient timing," Gabrielle noted, watching his reaction carefully, almost as if they expected something to happen. "They responded to an active threat, saving your life in the process." Clark countered smoothly. "Now I need to ask you some questions about yesterday's events." What followed was less an interview and more an interrogation with Clark, asking peculiarly specific questions about her history with Pearson, whether they had ever met before the trial, and if she had any connections to Riverside. At the mention of her hometown, Gabrielle maintained her poker face, claiming no familiarity with the place. Clark's eyes narrowed slightly. "That's strange because Pearson mentioned it specifically before he died. Yes, he didn't make it through surgery. Too much internal damage." Gabrielle felt an unexpected pang at this news. Not sympathy for Pearson, but the unsettling sensation that a puzzle piece had been removed before she could understand how it fit. I have no idea why he would say that she lied. Perhaps he was delirious from blood loss. After Clark left, Gabrielle noticed something she had missed before. A small camera in the upper corner of her room, its red light blinking steadily. She was under surveillance. But by whom? FBI local police. Someone else entirely. Her husband Marcus arrived that afternoon, his normally confident demeanor shaken. He embraced her, carefully mindful of her injury. "God, Gabrielle, when I heard." His voice broke. "I thought I'd lost you." She held him with her good arm, drawing comfort from his familiar scent, but something felt off. His shoulders were too tense, his smile too forced. "How's Zoe taking it?" she asked. "She wanted to come, but I thought it best she stay with my mother for now. The media's been camped outside our house. It's a circus. Marcus ran a hand over his close-cropped hair, a nervous gesture she recognized from their early dating days. The firm's been calling nonstop. They're concerned about, well, everything. Concerned about me, or their reputation, Gabrielle asked sharply. Marcus looked away. Both, I guess. Lawrence Bennett is a major client of the firm. The admission hung between them like a physical presence. Bennett, Pearson's defense attorney, was connected to Marcus's law firm. How had she not known this? While Marcus stepped out to take a call, a hospital janitor entered to empty the trash. The older black man kept his head down, working efficiently, but as he passed her bed, he deliberately dropped his cloth. As he bent to retrieve it, he slipped a folded note onto her blanket, then left without a word. Gabrielle waited until Marcus returned to the hallway before unfolding the paper. Written in neat block letters, "They're watching you because of what happened in '99. Be careful who you trust." The note chilled her more than any threat. 1999, the year that had changed everything in Riverside. The year she'd left and never looked back. Who was this janitor? How did he know? Gabrielle crumpled the note and swallowed it with a sip of water rather than risk it being found. That evening, during a shift change, a young nurse named Tara checked Gabrielle's vitals while whispering, "I heard what happened to you. My brother was beaten by cops last year. No one believed him either." Before leaving, Tara pressed a small card into Gabrielle's hand, her employee ID badge. "Computer at the nurse's station is unlocked during dinner rush. Passwords on the back if you need it." Gabrielle waited until the hallway quieted before disconnecting her IV and carefully making her way to the empty nurse's station. Using Tara's credentials, she accessed the hospital records system, searching first for Pearson's information. His admission records showed something odd. Multiple visitors in the 2 days before the trial, including 2 police lieutenants who weren't part of his usual circle. More disturbing was a reference in his medical history to treatment for injuries sustained during a training exercise called Operation Cleanse Sweep just 3 months earlier. No details were provided about this operation, but a notification flag indicated that all records related to it required special clearance. Have you been following along closely with Judge Watson's disturbing discoveries? The threats, the surveillance, the mysterious note about 1999? Comment number 1. If you believe something bigger than a simple courtroom attack is happening here. Hit that like button if you're shocked by how deep this conspiracy seems to go. And if you're wondering what happened in Riverside back in 1999 that could be connected to this case, subscribe now to make sure you don't miss what comes next. Would you risk accessing confidential records if you were in Gabrielle's position? What dark secrets from her past could possibly be worth killing for? The answers await in the next part of this shocking true story. Against medical advice, Gabrielle checked herself out of the hospital 3 days later. The official story was that she needed rest in a more private setting, but she had a different agenda entirely. She arranged for a car service to take her to the airport, where she paid cash for a ticket to Henderson County, just 30 miles from Riverside. She wore a headscarf and sunglasses, leaving her designer clothes behind for jeans and a plain sweater. Her shoulder throbbed beneath its bandage, but determination pushed her forward. The small regional airport was mercifully empty of media. Gabrielle rented a modest sedan under her maiden name, Gabrielle Johnson, a name she hadn't used in almost 20 years. The 2-hour drive to Riverside gave her time to prepare mentally for returning to a place she had fought so hard to escape. The town looked smaller than she remembered. The main street lined with more empty storefronts than businesses, the once proud county courthouse now shabby with peeling paint. Despite surface changes, the invisible line dividing the white and black sections of town remained intact with prosperity, clearly concentrated on one side. Gabrielle checked into a roadside motel on the edge of town, paying cash and keeping interaction with the clerk minimal. Once alone, she created a simple disguise, reading glasses, different hairstyle, subtle changes, to make her less recognizable from news coverage. The county library became her first destination. Located in the white section of town, it had once been off-limits to her as a child, until integration forced its doors open. The elderly white librarian barely glanced at her, a small mercy. Gabrielle requested access to newspaper archives from 1999, claiming to be researching a book about small-town America. The microfiche machine sat in a corner, giving her privacy as she scrolled through months of local news. May 15th, 1999. The headline she remembered appeared on screen, Local teen dies after police encounter. 17-year-old Darius Williams had been stopped while walking home from a basketball game. The official report claimed he resisted arrest and suffered injuries during restraint. He died 3 days later from internal bleeding. What followed was a predictable pattern. Initial community outrage, promises of investigation, then gradual silence, as witnesses suddenly changed their stories or refused to speak. The most vocal critic of the police had been Gabrielle's father, Thomas Johnson, a respected deacon at Riverside Baptist Church. The paper quoted him, saying he had evidence of police brutality, including a video recording. 3 weeks later, a small article reported Thomas Johnson's death in a hunting accident, despite the fact that he had never hunted a day in his life. Gabrielle remembered that day with perfect clarity. Police officers at their door, her mother collapsing, and the whispered warning from her father's friend. "They're watching your house. Get out while you can." Within a month, her mother had sent Gabrielle to live with an aunt in Chicago. She never returned to Riverside, until now. The connection was obvious but horrifying. Pearson's father, Raymond Pearson, had been one of the officers involved in Darius Williams' death. The article listed him as the supervising officer who attempted life-saving measures. The young officer who had actually struck the fatal blows, James Haggerty, had been cleared of all wrongdoing and now served as Riverside's police chief. Gabrielle felt ill. The son of one officer involved in that cover-up had tried to kill her, and another participant now ran the police department. As she left the library, Gabrielle noticed a black SUV with tinted windows parked across the street, its engine running. She walked in the opposite direction, taking a circuitous route back toward her motel. The evening streets were mostly empty, but she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. A hand suddenly grabbed her arm, pulling her into the narrow space between two buildings. She opened her mouth to scream when a familiar voice whispered, "Gabby, it's me, Deacon." Only one person had ever called her that. Deacon James, her childhood friend, and her father's namesake, stood before her. Now in his early 40s, like herself, he wore the collar of an ordained minister. "You shouldn't have come back," he said urgently. "They know you're here." He led her through a maze of back alleys to a small church on the black side of town. Inside his office, Deacon locked the door and closed the blinds before speaking again. "I recognized you the moment you stepped into that library. If I did, others might too." "How did you know I'd go there?" Gabrielle asked. "Because you're Thomas Johnson's daughter, always searching for truth." He gestured for her to sit. That courthouse shooting made national news. "When I saw your face, Judge Gabrielle Watson, I knew immediately who you really were." Deacon opened a hidden compartment in his desk, removing a thick folder. "Your father gave me this the day before he died. I've been adding to it ever since." The folder contained newspaper clippings, photographs, handwritten statements, and official documents. 2 decades of police abuses systematically documented. "Your father wasn't the only one who died for speaking up," Deacon explained. "Over the years, anyone who challenged the department had accidents, or their children got arrested on fabricated charges, or they simply disappeared." The most recent additions were printouts connecting current police leadership to white supremacist organizations, financial records showing unexplained payments, and an organizational chart linking Riverside Police to departments in multiple jurisdictions, including Gabrielle's current city. "It's not just a few bad officers," Deacon said gravely. "It's a network. They protect each other, promote each other, cover for each other." Pearson's son, ending up in your courtroom wasn't coincidence. A soft knock at the door made them both freeze. Deacon approached cautiously, checking through a peephole before opening it. A woman in her 30s, with close-cropped hair and an athletic build, entered quickly. "You need to move," she said without preamble. "There are officers canvassing the area." She stopped short upon seeing Gabrielle. "You're the judge." Deacon made quick introductions. "This is Tanya Winters. She's been helping our community document police misconduct." "Actually," the woman said, pulling out a badge, "I'm Special Agent Tanya Winters, FBI. And you, Judge Watson, are stirring up a hornet's nest by coming here." Gabrielle tensed, preparing to flee, but Winters held up her hands. "I'm not here to stop you. I'm investigating the same network you've just discovered. I've been undercover in Riverside for 8 months, building a case against interconnected police corruption across 3 states. "Why should I trust you?" Gabrielle demanded. "You could be part of the surveillance operation against me." "Because I was one of the agents in your courtroom," Winters replied. "My partner Rodriguez took the kill shots on Pearson." We were there because we had intelligence that something might happen, though we expected a planted piece of evidence, not an armed attack. Winters showed Gabrielle photos of police officers meeting with judges and prosecutors from various jurisdictions, including her own city. This goes beyond racist cops covering for each other. They're systematically controlling who gets charged, who goes free, which cases get priority. And they eliminate threats, like your father. If you have all this evidence, why haven't you made arrests? Gabrielle challenged. Because we need someone with credibility to testify, Winters explained. Someone like a federal judge who can connect the historical pattern to current events. I can protect you if you work with me officially. Gabrielle considered the offer, but felt uncertain. This woman had appeared too conveniently, and after recent events her trust was in short supply. I need time to think, she said finally. Winters nodded, handing her a secure phone. Use this if you decide to help, but don't wait too long. They're already moving to contain the situation you've created. After parting ways, Gabrielle returned to her motel by a different route, Deacon's file carefully hidden in her bag. Opening her room door, she immediately sensed something wrong. Though nothing appeared obviously disturbed, her instincts screamed danger. Stepping into the bathroom, she found her answer, written across the mirror, in what looked like lipstick, "Leave now, or die like your father." The message was clear. Riverside hadn't forgotten her, and neither had those who had killed her father. Whatever she had stumbled into by presiding over Pearson's trial, it connected directly to the darkness in her past, a darkness that had patiently waited 2 decades for her return. Gabrielle returned home to find her perfect life disintegrating. Her elegant house no longer felt like a sanctuary. Media vans camped at the end of her driveway, and strange cars drove slowly past at all hours. Marcus had moved Zoe back home from his mother's, believing the media frenzy had died down enough to be safe. The reunion with her daughter was bittersweet. Zoe clung to Gabrielle, tears soaking through the fabric, covering Gabrielle's injured shoulder. "I thought you were going to die," she whispered, "when they showed you being carried out of the courthouse." Gabrielle stroked her daughter's braids, murmuring reassurances she didn't entirely believe herself. Later that night, after Zoe went to bed, Marcus poured himself a scotch, his third of the evening. He loosened his tie with uncharacteristic weariness. "We need to talk about what happens next," he said, not meeting her eyes. Gabrielle sat across from him, the distance between them feeling greater than the few feet of kitchen island separating them. "The firm called an emergency partner meeting today," he continued. "They're suggesting I take a leave of absence until this blows over. The optics of having a partner whose wife is involved in such a controversial situation. It's complicated." "Complicated," Gabrielle repeated incredulously. "I was shot in my own courtroom by a corrupt officer." "What exactly is controversial about that?" Marcus finally looked at her, his expression strained. "You know it's not that simple. Half the media is painting Pearson as a dedicated officer pushed to the breaking point by an agenda-driven judge. The police union is claiming you showed bias throughout the trial. Bennett has filed a formal complaint with the Judicial Review Board. The betrayal stung worse than her bullet wound." "So you're taking their side. After 20 years together, I'm not taking sides," Marcus snapped, then immediately lowered his voice. "I'm trying to protect our family, my career, Zoe's future. Everything we've built. This isn't just about you, Gabrielle." The words hung between them like a physical barrier. Gabrielle thought about the file from Deacon hidden in her home office, about the connections between Pearson Riverside and the police in their current city, about the camera she had discovered in her hospital room. How much could she tell Marcus? Did she fully trust him anymore? Before she could decide, Zoe appeared in the doorway, her expression troubled. "Mom, can I show you something?" In her bedroom, Zoe unlocked her phone and showed Gabrielle a series of messages from anonymous numbers. The most recent read, "Ask your mother about what she did before she became a judge. Ask her why she changed her name from Johnson." Others contained details about Zoe's movements, when she left school, which coffee shop she visited with friends, what she wore to volleyball practice. "They started after you were shot," Zoe explained, her voice trembling. "At first I thought it was just some creep from school, but they know things, Mom. Things nobody should know unless they're watching me." Gabrielle's blood ran cold. They were surveilling her 16-year-old daughter. "Have you told Dad about these?" No, Zoe admitted. "He's been so stressed. And some of the messages say I shouldn't trust him either." The implication horrified Gabrielle. They were trying to isolate her from her own family. That night, after everyone was asleep, Gabrielle installed additional security systems throughout the house: cameras, motion sensors, upgraded locks. She paid cash, used a friend's name, and hired an independent contractor, rather than one of the major security companies that might have connections to local police. The next morning, she discovered all the cameras had been disabled. The system showed no intruders, yet every device had been carefully professionally compromised. Someone had entered their home while they slept. With growing paranoia, Gabrielle began examining her husband's behavior more critically. She noticed Marcus taking phone calls in another room, speaking in hushed tones. His laptop was suddenly password protected. One afternoon, she returned home unexpectedly to find him searching through her home office, rifling through files in her desk. "What are you doing?" she demanded from the doorway. Marcus jumped guiltily. "I needed to borrow a flash drive. Thought you might have one in here." The obvious lie hung between them. That evening, she confronted him directly. "Who contacted you about me? Was it the police union, Bennett? Who are you feeding information to?" Marcus's facade crumbled. "It's not what you think, Gabrielle. They approached me last week, men claiming to be from internal affairs. They said they were investigating corruption and needed my help to clear your name. And you believed that." "At first, yes. But then they started asking about your past, about Riverside, about your father. Things I didn't even know." Marcus looked genuinely frightened. "They showed me evidence, photos, documents. Said if I didn't cooperate, they'd reveal certain things about my past that could destroy my career." "What things?" Gabrielle pressed. Marcus looked away. "Before we met, I helped a senior partner cover up financial improprieties for a major client. Nothing illegal, but unethical enough to get me disbarred if it came out. I was young, ambitious." The confession transformed Gabrielle's anger into something more complicated. They had both kept secrets, built their perfect life on carefully concealed foundations. Before they could discuss further, the sound of breaking glass shattered the moment. A brick had crashed through their living room window, wrapped in paper, secured by a rubber band. The message was simple: justice for Pearson. Gabrielle immediately called the police, but their response was deliberately slow, almost 2 hours passing before officers arrived. She recognized one of them from photos in Deacon's file, a white officer who had transferred from Riverside 5 years earlier. He took minimal notes, suggested it was probably just kids, and left without dusting for fingerprints or collecting the brick as evidence. Later that evening, Gabrielle received an encrypted message on the secure phone Agent Winters had given her. It contained obituary clippings for 6 people connected to the Riverside case from 1999. All deaths ruled accidental, or due to natural causes, all occurring within 5 years of Darius Williams's death. The message read, "This is what happens to witnesses. Decision time, Judge." The pressure continued mounting from all sides. The police chief held a press conference questioning Gabrielle's account of the courtroom shooting, suggesting she may have provoked Pearson with inappropriate comments not captured in the official record. Judicial colleagues began canceling lunch meetings with her, citing scheduling conflicts. Her clerk requested reassignment to another judge. Only one colleague stood by her: Judge Raymond Chen, an older Asian American jurist with 30 years on the bench. He invited her to his home, carefully sweeping for listening devices before speaking freely. "They did this to me 10 years ago," he confided, showing her files documenting similar intimidation patterns against judges who ruled against police in misconduct cases. "They isolate you, discredit you, then either force you to resign or ensure you're never assigned cases involving their interests." "Why are you helping me?" Gabrielle asked. "Because I should have helped the others who came before you," Chen replied grimly. "My silence made me complicit. I won't make that mistake again." As Gabrielle left Chen's house, she noticed a car following her, the same model as the one that had watched her in Riverside. The message was clear: nowhere was safe, no one could be fully trusted, and the network she had inadvertently challenged was both patient and far-reaching. Her perfect life was crumbling, but from the ruins a new determination was forming, not just to clear her name or protect her family, but to expose the entire corrupt system that had claimed her father's life and now threatened her. Own. Rain pounded against the windows of the abandoned office building where Gabrielle had arranged to meet Deacon. After her confrontation with Marcus, she no longer felt safe discussing sensitive matters at home or in public spaces. Deacon arrived looking exhausted, having driven 6 hours straight from Riverside. "I had to come," he explained, shaking rainwater from his coat. "There have been people asking questions about you all over town." They're not even trying to be subtle anymore. He placed a waterproof case on the dusty desk between them. After you left, I gathered everything I could about the connections between Riverside and your city. It's worse than we thought. The case contained photographs, financial records, and internal police memos that had been leaked by sympathetic officers over the years. Together, they spread the documents across the floor, creating a physical map of connections. Police chiefs across 3 states had all served together in Riverside during the late 90s. Judges who consistently ruled in favor of police in misconduct cases had received campaign donations from the same network of donors. Prosecutors who declined to pursue cases against officers were later appointed to lucrative positions. It's not just racist cops protecting each other, Deacon explained. It's systematic control of the entire justice system. They decide which cases get priority, which evidence gets processed, which witnesses are considered credible. A knock at the door silenced them both. Gabrielle reached for the small handgun she had recently acquired, but relaxed slightly when Agent Winter's voice called out the agreed-upon code phrase. The FBI agent entered, accompanied by a man Gabrielle recognized from her courtroom. Agent Rodriguez, the second FBI officer who had shot Pearson. "We don't have much time," Winters said without preamble. "There's been a development." She placed a flash drive on the table. This was recovered from Pearson's personal effects. It was hidden in a secret compartment in his service weapon, the one he didn't use in the courtroom. The drive was encrypted, requiring specialized knowledge to access. Winters had brought someone who could help, a former hacker named Elijah, who now worked in cybersecurity. "I can't officially sanction this," she explained as Elijah worked. "My superiors have ordered me to drop the Riverside connection, claiming it's outside our jurisdiction. Someone's interfering with the investigation from inside the bureau." Elijah eventually broke through the encryption, revealing files detailing something called Operation Cleansweep, the same operation mentioned in Pearson's medical records. The documents described a systematic effort to identify and neutralize potential witnesses against police officers across multiple jurisdictions. Some targets were intimidated through traffic stops or arrests of family members. Others lost jobs mysteriously or had their professional licenses challenged. Those who persisted despite warnings experienced accidents or faced fabricated criminal charges. Most disturbing was a target list from 1,999 that included Thomas Johnson, Gabrielle's father, with the notation "Permanent Solution Authorized." Pearson was part of this. Gabrielle asked, her voice hollow. "Not initially," Winters explained. "Based on these files, he joined after his father died. Raymond Pearson was one of the founders, but he developed a conscience late in life. He was planning to come forward when he died suddenly of a heart attack, a death these files suggest was not natural. So Kevin Pearson joined the very group that killed his father, Rodriguez questioned. "No," Elijah interrupted, pointing to later entries. According to this, Pearson discovered the truth about his father's death only recently. He was gathering evidence, planning to expose everything. These final entries suggest he was becoming increasingly paranoid, convinced he was being watched. The revelation stunned Gabrielle, so his breakdown in my courtroom may not have been about you at all, Winters finished. He might have been trying to create a public incident where he couldn't simply disappear. The gun could have been for self-protection rather than an attack on you. But he put it to my head, Gabrielle protested. Called me racial slurs. Or he was creating a scene, Rodriguez suggested. Drawing attention, making sure there would be witnesses and media coverage if anything happened to him. Winters nodded. The files show he'd been investigating the Riverside incident independently. He knew about your connection to Thomas Johnson. He might have been trying to warn you in his own unstable way. As they digested this information, Deacon's phone buzzed with an alert from a contact in Riverside. "They've issued a warrant for my arrest," he said incredulously, claiming I misappropriated church funds. "It's fabricated, but they'll make it stick." While they discussed next steps, Gabrielle received a distressing call from Judge Chen. Deacon had been right. A warrant had been issued, but not just for him. Similar legal actions were being prepared against everyone connected to Gabrielle's investigation. "They're using the system against you," Chen warned. "They've assigned all the cases to judges in their pocket." Leaving the meeting, they split up to avoid being tracked together. Gabrielle headed to her car, parked several blocks away as a precaution. As she approached, she saw police vehicles surrounding it. Officers were examining her license plate and speaking into radios. She retreated around the corner, calling for a rideshare service under a false name. Upon reaching the downtown area, she witnessed something that stopped her cold. Deacon being forced into a police car, officers handling him roughly despite his clerical collar. When she attempted to approach, identifying herself as a federal judge, officers physically blocked her. "This doesn't concern you, ma'am," one said firmly. "We don't recognize your authority here." The deliberate disrespect confirmed what she already knew. Her position no longer protected her. More alarming was the officer's next comment, spoken quietly as he turned away. "You should worry about your own family, Judge." Gabrielle rushed home, calling Marcus repeatedly with no answer. When she arrived, the front door stood ajar. Inside, furniture was overturned, drawers emptied onto floors. Signs of a struggle were evident in the kitchen. A broken glass, a smear of blood on the counter. Both Marcus and Zoe were gone with no note, no message. Only their phones left behind on the table. A clear signal that communication would be on the kidnappers' terms. Are you beginning to see how extensive this corruption network truly is? How it reaches from small-town police departments all the way to federal agencies? Comment number 1. If you believe Gabrielle should trust Agent Winters or number Matey. 2. If you think everyone could be part of this conspiracy. Hit the like button if you're shocked by the revelation about Officer Pearson's true intentions. And subscribe now to discover what happens next as Gabrielle faces her greatest challenge yet. With her family missing and allies being arrested, what would you do in her position? How far would you go to protect your loved ones and expose the truth? The answers await in our next segment. Gabrielle's hands trembled as she paced the empty house, fighting against rising panic. 20 minutes after discovering her family missing, her phone rang with an unknown number. She answered immediately, putting it on speaker. "Hello," a distorted voice responded, "Judge Watson. By now you understand your situation." In the background, she could hear muffled sounds, possibly Zoe crying. "If you harm them," Gabrielle began, but the voice cut her off. "Their safety depends entirely on your cooperation. We require all evidence you've gathered about Riverside and Operation Cleansweep. Additionally, you will hold a press conference tomorrow morning recanting your testimony about the courtroom incident. You will state that Officer Pearson never attacked you, that the FBI agents overreacted to a misunderstanding. The demand was clear. Sacrifice justice for family." "I need proof they're alive," Gabrielle insisted, struggling to keep her voice steady. After a pause, a video call replaced the voice call. The screen showed Marcus and Zoe seated on metal chairs in what appeared to be a warehouse. Marcus had a bruised face but was conscious. Zoe looked terrified but unharmed. A masked figure stood behind them, a hand resting ominously on Zoe's shoulder. 24 hours, the distorted voice said before ending the call. Gabrielle's judicial training had taught her to remain calm in crisis, to analyze options methodically. But this was different. Her family's lives hung in the balance. With local law enforcement compromised and FBI involvement uncertain, traditional channels offered no safety. She needed allies beyond the system. Her first call was to Catherine Park, her former law school roommate, and now a Pulitzer-winning investigative journalist. They had maintained their friendship despite busy careers, though they hadn't spoken in months. Catherine answered on the second ring. "Gabby, I've been trying to reach you since the shooting. Are you okay?" Without revealing her location, Gabrielle explained the situation in clinical detail. "I need someone outside the system who can protect information and potentially publish it as leverage. Someone with resources and public credibility." Catherine didn't hesitate. "Come to my apartment. Use the service entrance. I'll clear my schedule." Within an hour, Gabrielle had reached Catherine's high-security apartment building, slipping in through the loading dock to avoid security cameras. Catherine had transformed her dining room into an impromptu command center. Multiple laptops, a secure server, and printing equipment. "I've been following police corruption stories for years," she explained, showing Gabrielle files remarkably similar to Deacon's. "Different cities, same patterns. I could never connect them all until now." Together they created secure digital copies of all evidence, storing them on encrypted servers across multiple countries. Catherine began preparing a comprehensive exposé while Gabrielle made her second critical call to Judge Chen. "I need access to sealed records," she explained without preamble. "Cases involving police misconduct across the state for the past 20 years. Chen understood immediately. "Meet me at the courthouse archive. Use the judge's private entrance. I'll disable the cameras for 10 minutes at midnight." The archive contained records not available in digital systems, case files deemed too sensitive for potential hacking. Working with flashlights, Gabrielle and Chen uncovered patterns confirming their suspicions. Systematic dismissal of police misconduct cases by specific judges, witness recantations following documented threats, evidence mysteriously lost before trial. They've been operating in plain sight for decades. Chen whispered, his face grim in the dim light, using the very system designed for justice to prevent it. As they finished documenting the evidence, a noise from the corridor froze them both. Footsteps approached slowly, deliberately. Chen motioned for Gabrielle to hide behind a row of filing cabinets while he stepped into the open. "Just finishing some research, officer," she heard him say casually. "Judge's prerogative." The response was a sudden thud, and Chen's grunt of pain. Gabrielle peered through a gap between cabinets to see 3 men in police uniforms standing over Chen's collapsed form. One spoke into a radio. "We've got Chen. No sign of Watson yet." Expanding search perimeter, Gabrielle remained motionless until they dragged Chen away, then slipped out through an emergency exit, triggering an alarm she hoped would create confusion. Outside, she kept to shadows, using service alleys to avoid main streets where patrol cars now circulated with spotlight beams sweeping systematically across buildings. A hand suddenly gripped her arm, pulling her into a doorway. She fought instinctively until she recognized the face. Officer Michaels, a young police rookie she had seen in court during Pearson's trial. "Judge Watson, please," he whispered urgently. "I'm trying to help. They're looking everywhere for you." His fearful expression seemed genuine. "Why should I trust you?" Gabrielle demanded. "I joined the force to protect people," he replied simply. "What they're doing, hunting a federal judge, kidnapping your family. It's not why I became a cop." Michaels led her through maintenance tunnels beneath the city to a small apartment above a closed barber shop. "My cousin owns it," he explained. "No one knows I have access. You'll be safe here temporarily." The sparsely furnished space offered bare necessities, a bathroom, kitchen, alcove, fold-out couch. "They've mobilized everyone," Michaels continued, "called it a top priority fugitive search. The official story is that you assaulted Chen and escaped custody after being questioned about judicial misconduct. The narrative inversion was breathtaking, transforming her from victim to perpetrator." "What about my family?" Gabrielle asked. Michaels shook his head. "I don't know. That operation is being handled by a separate team, very compartmentalized." While Michaels went to gather more information, Gabrielle contacted Catherine with her secure phone. The journalist had already prepared preliminary articles with evidence of the conspiracy ready to publish on multiple platforms simultaneously if necessary. "We could release this now," Catherine suggested. "Public exposure might force them to release your family rather than create more victims. Or it could panic them into eliminating witnesses," Gabrielle countered. "We need leverage more immediate than public opinion." Her mind raced through legal frameworks, seeking procedural tools that might help. Despite everything, she remained a judge who believed in the system's potential, even as she fought its corruption. By morning, Gabrielle had developed a strategy combining legal pressure, media exposure, and direct action. The conspirators' greatest strength, their network throughout the justice system, could become their weakness if exposed systematically rather than piecemeal. Their control depended on maintaining legitimate appearances. "They want me to recant publicly," she told Catherine when she arrived with supplies. "So I'll give them their press conference, but not the one they expect." Catherine looked concerned. "They have your family, Gabby." Exactly why this has to work perfectly the first time. Gabrielle spent hours preparing, analyzing every angle of her plan. She recognized the terrible irony. The conspirators had mistaken her for an easy target precisely because of the racism they embodied. They saw her only as a diversity appointment, a token black woman judge, who had received her position through affirmative action rather than merit. They hadn't bothered to research her actual background. Graduated top of her class from Harvard Law, phenomenal win record as both prosecutor and defense attorney, known for methodical case construction that left no room for appeals. Their fundamental underestimation of her abilities would be their downfall. Officer Michaels returned with disturbing news. Judge Chen had been hospitalized after resisting questioning. More ominously, Deacon had been transferred to county jail and placed in general population where corrupt officers could easily arrange an inmate incident. Gabrielle added these developments to her planning board, seeing them as desperate moves by an increasingly reactive opposition. As midnight approached, the deadline for her response to the kidnappers, Gabrielle prepared to implement her counterattack. Not a surrender, but a precisely calibrated trap, using the very system her opponents had corrupted against them. "They expect me to break," she told Catherine as they finalized preparations. "They don't understand that they've already taken everything I was afraid to lose. All that's left is a woman with nothing to lose and everything to fight for." Dawn broke over the city as news vans gathered outside the federal courthouse. Word had spread that Judge Gabrielle Watson would make a public statement regarding the courtroom shooting and subsequent investigations. Behind the scenes, Catherine had carefully leaked just enough information to ensure maximum media coverage while concealing Gabrielle's true intentions. Inside a service entrance, Gabrielle prepared herself mentally. The bruise-concealing makeup couldn't hide her exhaustion, but her eyes burned with determination. "Are you sure about this?" Catherine asked, adjusting Gabrielle's collar to conceal the wire she wore. "Once you start, there's no turning back." Gabrielle nodded. "They've already taken everything from me. Now they'll learn what that means." Her phone buzzed with a message from the kidnappers. "Remember our terms. Deviation means consequences." Attached was a photo of Marcus and Zoe, a newspaper dated that morning visible to prove the image was current. At precisely 9 o'clock, Gabrielle emerged from the courthouse to approach the podium set up on the steps. Cameras flashed as reporters shouted questions. She raised her hands for silence, the gesture revealing her still bandaged shoulder. "Thank you all for coming." She began, her voice steady, despite her inner turmoil. "Recent events have raised serious questions about our justice system that must be addressed." From the corner of her eye, she spotted the police chief and several officers watching intently from an unmarked vehicle. "Good. The key players were present. I want to clarify what happened in my courtroom last week," Gabrielle continued. Officer Kevin Pearson approached the bench in what appeared to be a threatening manner. However, she paused, seeing the police chief nod slightly, believing she was following their script. "However, I now understand this incident represents something far more significant than one officer's actions." The atmosphere shifted as listeners sensed this wasn't the expected recantation. "For the past week, I have been the target of intimidation, surveillance, and threats. My family has been abducted. My colleagues threatened. All to prevent me from revealing a truth that extends far beyond my courtroom." The police chief was now speaking urgently into his radio. Gabrielle knew she had minutes at most. "What I have uncovered is a systematic network of corruption, spanning multiple jurisdictions, protecting officers who violate their oaths and the civil rights of citizens. This network extends to prosecutors, judges, and officials who have perverted our justice system to serve their own interests." Catherine's team had ensured this broadcast streamed live across multiple platforms beyond the control of local media that might be pressured to cut the feed. Gabrielle methodically outlined key evidence, names, and connections. Knowing each word increased danger to herself, but also made the information impossible to contain. "Even as I speak, Judge Raymond Chen lies hospitalized after being assaulted by officers for assisting my investigation. Reverend Deacon James remains unlawfully detained on fabricated charges, and my husband and daughter are being held hostage to force my silence." Police officers began moving through the crowd toward the podium. Gabrielle increased her pace. "I have arranged for comprehensive evidence of these crimes to be released to media outlets nationwide if anything happens to me or my family. The complete files are already in the hands of the Department of Justice, bypassing potentially compromised local FBI offices." This last claim was a calculated bluff. She had attempted to contact DOJ but couldn't confirm receipt of her evidence. As officers reached the steps, a commotion erupted at the perimeter. Federal marshals in tactical gear moved in with practiced efficiency. Judge Chen, despite his injuries, had managed to contact the U.S. Marshals Service directly invoking special jurisdiction for threats against federal judges. Federal marshals, their leader, announced through a bullhorn. This is now a federal protection operation. Local law enforcement stand down immediately. The resulting standoff created precious minutes for Gabrielle to continue. Meanwhile, Catherine had deployed the second phase of their plan, simultaneous publication of key evidence across dozens of news outlets, creating an information cascade impossible to contain. The operation to rescue Marcus and Zoe commenced simultaneously at 3 potential locations identified through Michael's intelligence gathering. SWAT teams not connected to the conspiracy executed coordinated raids, having been briefed directly by federal authorities outside the compromised chain of command. Gabrielle watched the police chief's face as he received updates through his earpiece, his expression shifting from confidence to alarm. She maintained eye contact as she delivered her most damaging revelation, Operation Cleanse Sweep, a systematic program to intimidate, silence, and eliminate witnesses against police misconduct, has been active for over 20 years, claiming dozens of lives disguised as accidents or natural causes. The chief pushed through marshals to reach her, his control crumbling. "You have no idea what you're doing," he hissed. "This goes higher than you can imagine." "Your family is already," Gabrielle activated the recording device in her lapel. "Already what, Chief Reynolds? Please explain exactly what you mean about my family." He realized his mistake too late. In his panic, he had inadvertently confirmed knowledge of the kidnapping, information an innocent police chief would not possess. Marshals moved to detain him as chaos erupted around them. Through her earpiece, Gabrielle received the news she had been desperately waiting for: package secure. Repeat: package secure. Both assets recovered safely. Marcus and Zoe had been found in an abandoned warehouse owned by a police union subsidiary. As she was escorted to safety by marshals, Gabrielle finally allowed herself a moment of relief, but it was short-lived. One of the marshals, Agent Winters in tactical gear, pulled her aside. "This isn't over," she warned. "The network reaches higher than local police. Federal officials can override even the marshal's service. You've exposed the foot soldiers, but the generals remain untouched." Indeed, within hours, pressure mounted from unexpected directions. A federal circuit judge, known for conservative rulings, issued an emergency injunction against further publication of potentially sensitive materials related to ongoing investigations. The local FBI office received orders to seize all evidence as matter of national security, superseding the marshal's authority. Most concerning, Catherine reported attempts to hack her secure servers from IP addresses traced to government facilities in Washington. Marcus, treated for significant injuries sustained protecting Zoe during the rescue, confirmed Gabrielle's worst fears. "They were talking about contingency plans while they thought I was unconscious," he told her in the hospital's secure room. "Something about federal intervention if the local operation failed." "Gabby, I don't think even DOJ is completely clean in this." Gabrielle realized they had entered an even more dangerous phase. The conspiracy had been wounded, but not defeated. Its more powerful members were now mobilizing resources beyond local control. With her family still at risk and nowhere officially safe, Gabrielle made the difficult decision to go completely off-grid. Agent Winters, Catherine, and their small group of allies established a secure location in a cabin owned by Chen's family outside normal jurisdiction. There they compiled their complete case, analyzing thousands of documents to identify every member of the network across all levels of government. They worked against time, knowing the opposition was regrouping and would strike again with its considerable resources. The next phase would require not just exposure, but systematic dismantling of corruption that had metastasized throughout the justice system. Gabrielle understood the personal cost might be permanent. Her career, their home, their former lives might never be recovered. But watching Zoe sleeping fitfully on the cabin's couch, still traumatized but safe, she knew with absolute certainty that justice was worth any price. 3 months later, Gabrielle entered a different courtroom, not as a judge but as the key witness in a federal RICO case against the police network. The massive wood-paneled chamber in the Eastern District Federal Court was filled to capacity with journalists occupying a designated section and strict security protocols in place. Gabrielle approached the witness stand with measured steps, acutely aware of the historical significance of the moment. She had spent the intervening months in protective custody, working with a special prosecutor appointed directly by the Attorney General after the scope of corruption became impossible to ignore. The coordinated publication of evidence across dozens of news outlets had created unprecedented public pressure, forcing official action despite resistance from compromised officials. The RICO indictment named 47 defendants across multiple jurisdictions, police officers, judges, prosecutors, and public officials, alleged to be part of a criminal enterprise operating within the justice system. Their crimes included evidence tampering, witness intimidation, obstruction of justice, and murder, disguised as accidents spanning 3 decades. Gabrielle's testimony was the linchpin connecting historical patterns to current operations. For 6 hours, she methodically presented evidence of systematic abuse of power, tracing connections from her father's murder in 1999 to the courthouse attack. She explained how Operation Cleanse Sweep targeted witnesses against police misconduct, and how Pearson's breakdown had inadvertently exposed everything. During cross-examination, defense attorneys attempted to undermine her credibility through familiar tactics, suggesting she was an angry black woman with a vendetta against police, claiming her evidence was circumstantial, painting her as emotionally unstable after the shooting. Gabrielle maintained composed precision throughout, dismantling each attack with irrefutable documentation and logical analysis. Your Honor, one defense attorney argued, Judge Watson's entire narrative depends on a conspiracy theory constructed after a traumatic event. She's built connections between unrelated incidents across decades based on personal bias. Gabrielle responded with characteristic directness. The evidence doesn't require my interpretation to reveal its patterns. The statistical improbability of 26 witnesses across 3 states dying of accidents within weeks of scheduled testimony against police speaks for itself. The financial transactions between defendants create a documentary trail independent of my narrative. These aren't connections I invented. They're connections the defendants documented themselves, believing their records would never face public scrutiny. Most damaging to the defense was evidence recovered from Pearson's encrypted files, revealing that he had been preparing to turn informant before his courtroom breakdown. Contrary to initial appearances, his attack on Gabrielle hadn't been driven by racism or rage, but by desperate calculation, creating a public incident where he couldn't simply disappear. The conspirators had arranged his courtroom breakdown as an opportunity to silence him permanently while making it appear justified. The trial revealed the elaborate architecture of corruption that had operated for decades. Local police departments identified officers with potential for advancement and gradually indoctrinated them into the network. Those who refused were systematically marginalized or forced out. Judges received campaign contributions from police unions and affiliated donors with implicit expectations for favorable rulings. Prosecutors who questioned police testimony found their careers stalled. The system perpetuated itself through a combination of incentives, intimidation, and ideological alignment around maintaining order, often a euphemism for controlling minority communities and protecting officers regardless of conduct. From the gallery, Marcus watched the proceedings with a supportive but pained expression. Still recovering from injuries sustained during his captivity, he had permanently resigned from his law firm after discovering several senior partners were indirectly connected to the conspiracy through client relationships. Their marriage had survived but changed, strengthened by shared trauma, yet marked by a new wariness about trusting institutions they had once served faithfully. Judge Chen testified about his own motivation for assisting Gabrielle despite risks. His brother had been another victim of police violence years earlier, with evidence manipulated to justify the killing. I remained silent then. Chen told the court, his voice heavy with regret. I believed working within the system would eventually create change. I was wrong. Silence only enables corruption to spread. In a surprising development, several officers broke ranks to testify against their former colleagues. Officer Michaels, the rookie who had helped Gabrielle, provided crucial testimony about how the department had mobilized to capture her and suppress evidence. They told us she was mentally unstable, dangerous, he explained. But then I saw them fabricating evidence against her in real time. I couldn't be part of that. After 8 weeks of testimony, the jury returned guilty verdicts against 39 defendants, including the police chief and several judges. The sentences ranged from 10 years to life imprisonment for those directly involved in murders. The morning after the verdicts, Gabrielle sat with Catherine, Agent Winters, and Deacon on the porch of the safe house that had been their home during the trial. It's not over, Winters noted, reviewing reports of similar patterns emerging in other states. We identified one network, but there are others, and some powerful figures remain untouched, Catherine added. The highest levels of federal involvement were carefully insulated from direct evidence. Gabrielle nodded, sipping her coffee thoughtfully, which is why I've decided not to return to the bench. The announcement surprised them, though they had suspected she might make this choice. The system needs change from outside, as well as within, she explained. As a judge, I'm limited by procedure and precedent. We need something more direct. Together, they had established a foundation dedicated to investigating similar corruption nationwide, combining Catherine's journalistic expertise, Deacon's community connections, Winters' investigative skills, and Enerastery, Gabrielle's legal knowledge. Funded by a coalition of civil rights organizations and staffed by former prosecutors and law enforcement who shared their commitment to reform, the foundation represented a new approach to accountability. 1 year after the courthouse shooting, Gabrielle stood before a class of law students at her alma mater. Many had followed the trial and subsequent reforms with intense interest. Looking at their eager faces, diverse in ways her own class had not been, she felt cautious optimism. The justice system is not self-correcting, she told them. Its flaws, particularly systemic racism and corruption, persist because they benefit those with power. Change requires more than good intentions or incremental reforms. It demands vigilance, courage, and sometimes personal sacrifice. She described how the conspiracy had relied on people's tendency to trust authority to believe the system functioned as intended despite evidence to the contrary. Your generation has the opportunity to build something better, she concluded, not by blind faith in institutions, but by constantly questioning who they serve and holding them accountable. After the lecture, she met privately with a small group of black female students who had requested mentorship. Their questions reminded her of her younger self. Idealistic but pragmatic, determined to succeed in a system not designed for them. Will it ever really change? One asked candidly. Gabrielle considered the question seriously. It already has because of people who refuse to accept things as they were. And it will continue changing because of people like you who enter the system with clear eyes and firm principles. That evening, as Gabrielle drove home to the modest house she now shared with Marcus and Zoe, she reflected on the journey from that bloody courtroom floor to the present. Justice hadn't come easily or completely. The network had been damaged but not destroyed. Racism and corruption continued to infect the system in subtle and overt ways. But something fundamental had shifted, both in public awareness and in her own understanding of what justice required. The smoking gun had been in her hand that day, not literally but figuratively. By refusing to remain silent, by risking everything to expose the truth, she had fired a shot that continued to reverberate through courtrooms across the country. Not a bullet that destroyed life, but a truth that created possibility for a more just future. What do you think about Gabrielle's decision to leave the bench and fight corruption from outside the system? Was justice truly served in this case? Or do you believe the highest levels of this conspiracy remain untouched? Comment below with your thoughts about systemic racism in our justice system and what it might take to create real change. If this story moved you or made you think differently about corruption in law enforcement, please like, subscribe, and share it with others who need to hear this message. Thank you for joining me on this journey through one woman's fight against a system designed to silence her. Remember that in the face of injustice, your voice matters. Use it. The story of Judge Gabrielle Watson teaches us that justice is not guaranteed by systems alone, but by the courage of individuals willing to stand against corruption. When facing racist structures designed to silence truth, the path of least resistance is to surrender to choose personal safety over collective justice. Yet real change demands we reject this false choice. Gabrielle's journey illustrates how power maintains itself through isolation, making victims feel alone in their struggle, creating doubt about who can be trusted. The conspiracy succeeded for decades by exploiting this isolation, systematically eliminating those brave enough to speak up. The lesson is clear: corruption thrives in darkness. It counts on our silence, our fear, our belief that fighting back costs too much. It depends on convincing us that racism is just how things are, rather than deliberate choices made by people with power. True justice requires more than good intentions. It demands vigilance, documentation, strategic thinking, and building coalitions across dividing lines. Sometimes it means risking everything you've built, challenging institutions you once believed in. Most importantly, it teaches us that no single victory ends the struggle. Gabrielle's work continues beyond the courtroom because justice is not an achievement but a constant process, one that requires each generation to remain watchful and each individual to find their courage when the moment demands it. What would you do if faced with the choice between speaking truth and protecting yourself? Would you have the courage to challenge a corrupt system, even at great personal risk? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story of one woman's fight against racist corruption moved you, please hit that like button to help others find it too. Have you witnessed or experienced systemic racism in your community? How did you respond? Let us know in the comments. Subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories of ordinary people showing extraordinary courage in the face of injustice. And if you know someone who needs to hear this message about standing up against corruption, please share this video with them. Thank you for joining us for this important story. Remember, in a world where powerful forces work to maintain unjust systems, your voice matters more than you know. Speaking truth, even when it's dangerous, is how change begins. Stay vigilant, stay courageous, and never stop believing in the possibility of justice.